A week before our wedding, my husband's father called and said either sign a prenup that gives him everything or the wedding is off. My husband pleaded, just do it to keep the peace. Instead, I made a quiet call. The next day, his father opened his email and screamed when he saw what I had sent. For context, I am a 29-year-old female who was supposed to get married to my now ex-fiancé Brian, a 32-year-old male. We had been together for almost 5 years. We met in Chicago, dated all through our 20s, and finally decided to make it official. We weren't in a rush, but after buying a house together, it just felt like the right next step. I thought I knew him, I thought I knew his family. I was very wrong. Brian comes from money, not just we have a nice house and go on vacations money. I'm talking old money. His dad, Richard, owns a few businesses, real estate, law firms, some investment stuff I never fully understood. I work in marketing and do fine for myself, but I grew up very normally, 2 teachers for parents, small-town Midwest life. So yeah, when I started dating Brian, his lifestyle was new to me, but I never felt weird about it. He didn't act snobby or superior, at least not at first. But Richard is a different story. From the first dinner I had with his family, I felt like I was being interviewed, like I was applying for a job. He would throw little comments like, so what exactly is your plan for the next 5 years? Or do you think you'll ever aim higher than marketing? Like, excuse me? But whatever, I figured if Brian was okay with me, then his dad's opinion didn't matter anyway. Fast forward to the wedding. We planned it in New York because that's where his family is and most of his friends live there. I didn't care. I just wanted to marry the guy I loved, simple as that. We were a week out. Dress fitted, venue paid, guests flying in, everything was done. And then I got the call. It was a Monday morning. I was on my way to work when my phone rang. Richard. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. Richard. Straight to the point, no hello, no small talk. He says, we need you to sign a prenuptial agreement. I'll have my lawyer email it over today. Please have it signed before the rehearsal dinner. I remember thinking, okay, no big deal. Prenups make sense, especially with their money. I'd expected this at some point. But then he keeps talking. The prenup assigns full ownership of any shared assets to Brian in the case of divorce. Any property, any investments, any future earnings tied to the family business. You walk away with nothing. That includes the house you two bought last year. I'm silent. He waits, then says, if you're not willing to sign it, the wedding will be canceled. That's not negotiable. I asked him if Brian knew about this. Richard says, like I'm being difficult. Brian agrees, he just didn't know how to bring it up. He hoped you'd be reasonable about it. I don't even remember the rest of the conversation. I hung up. I sat in my car parked outside. My office was shaking. I called Brian and asked him if it was true. He was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, look, it's just to keep the peace with my dad. It's not like we're ever getting divorced. Just sign it, please. I'm staring out at the traffic thinking, are you kidding me? I get it, I do. Rich people are paranoid about their money, but this wasn't just some protect our assets pup. This was a full-on, you get nothing even if you help build our life prenup. And the worst part was Brian just expecting me to go along with it. I told him I needed time to think. He said, don't make this a big deal. But here's the thing. I had already started to notice little red flags, things I ignored, like how he always deferred to his dad on big decisions, how we picked the wedding venue based on what his family liked, not what we wanted, and how every time we talked about the future, he always said, my dad thinks, before giving his own opinion. So I made a quiet call, one I should have made months earlier. I called my uncle. He's a lawyer in New York, one of the good ones, the kind who gets hired when people like Richard want to sue each other over millions. I told him everything. I emailed him the prenup draft as soon as it hit my inbox that afternoon. His response, this isn't a prenup. This is a hostage letter. He walked me through exactly what was happening. Basically, Richard wanted total control over Brian's marriage and finances, and I was expected to legally hand over any rights I had before the wedding even happened. That night I stayed up reading case law, horror stories, asset splits. I learned more about marital law in 6 hours than I ever thought I'd need. By morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do. No drama, no screaming, no fighting. Just one very simple, very professional email to Richard. I drafted it with my uncle's help. Polite, straightforward. I thanked him for his concern, confirmed I had reviewed the prenup with my own legal counsel, and then I pointed out a list of clauses that were, as my uncle put it, grossly overreaching and legally questionable. I let him know that not only was I declining to sign the document, but if the wedding was canceled because of my refusal, I would be pursuing reimbursement for all costs I had personally covered, including my family's expenses, travel, and every deposit made from my own accounts. I CC'd my uncle, his law firm, Richard's lawyer, and Brian. I hit send around 9 a.m. By noon, Richard opened his email and screamed. Richard's scream must have shaken the whole block because less than an hour after I sent that email, my phone started blowing up. First Brian, then his mom, then his sister, text after text, missed calls, voicemails. Brian finally got through. "What the hell was that?" he snapped. "No greeting, just that." I kept my voice calm. "It's called protecting myself. Seems like your family isn't the only one allowed to do that." He huffed like I was the unreasonable one. "Oneable one, you could have just talked to me. Why bring lawyers into this?" I paused. "Why did your dad send me that joke of a prenup in the first place? You didn't think I deserved a heads up?" Silence. Then in this low, tired voice he muttered, "You're making this complicated." That sentence right there, that's when the switch flipped for me. I realized I was standing in the middle of a relationship where I was the only one looking out for me. But things got worse, way worse. That same evening, my uncle called me back after looking into Richard's businesses. Turns out this man wasn't just paranoid. He was hiding something. "Audrey," my uncle said, "there are some interesting lawsuits pending against him. Quiet ones. Settlements getting paid out fast. And get this. Some of those assets he's so desperate to protect, they're not even as secure as he's making them sound. The guy's leveraged up to his eyeballs. If anything, marrying Brian without a prenup would be your financial risk." My jaw dropped. So Richard wasn't just greedy, he was drowning, and he was trying to drag me into it while locking me out of any possible help if it all crashed down. The next day, I was at our house packing an overnight bag, just needing space. I wasn't even sure where I stood with Brian anymore. While I was there, Richard showed up. No call, no warning. Just pulled into the driveway in his black Mercedes and stormed to the front door like he owned the place. He didn't even knock, just barged in. "We need to have a chat," he said, standing in my living room like he paid the mortgage himself. I stayed by the staircase, phone in hand, recording. Richard looked me over like I was some employee who missed a deadline. "You've embarrassed my family calling in lawyers, using my attorney. That's not how this works." I tilted my head. "Pretty sure it is." He sneered. "Look, drop this. Sign the prenup, marry Brian, we all move on. You keep causing problems, I will personally make sure you regret it." I stared at him. "Is that a threat? Take it how you want." And that was it. That's when I decided this wasn't just about a prenup anymore. Richard was used to people folding. He'd been pulling these power moves his whole life, but I wasn't going to play along. And Brian? He didn't even come home that night. He said he was staying at his parents' to help smooth things over. While he was there, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started looking through our shared files. The accounts we opened together, the paperwork we'd kept for the house, utilities, insurance. And that's when I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Hidden in the documents, there was a folder labeled Private. I almost didn't click it, but curiosity won. Inside, a draft of another prenup dated 6 months earlier. This one was kinder, normal. It split things fairly, protected us both, and it was written up by a different lawyer, not Richard's. But it had notes all over it in Brian's handwriting. Edits, crossed out sections. The worst one next to the part that said, "I." He clinked his glass, flashed that fake politician smile, and launched into this speech about family and legacy, and the importance of protecting what we built. I realized something right then. Richard wasn't afraid of me. He never had been. To him, I was just another pawn on his board, something to control, move around, or knock over until now. Because just before I left the house that afternoon, my uncle sent me a final file, proof that Richard's business accounts had been bleeding money for months. He was moving funds between companies, making payments on personal expenses through business ledgers, mixing accounts like it was nothing. And get this. It turns out some of the wedding vendors were businesses owned by his friends. Fake invoices, fake services. He was using our wedding to move hundreds of thousands of dollars around. The moment I married Brian, half of that mess would be on me. I had printed copies of everything, neatly organized in a folder in my purse, sitting on the table beside me like just another clutch bag. Richard finished his speech, people clapped, and as soon as they quieted down, I stood up. I didn't plan to, honestly, but the moment felt too perfect. "Can I say something?" I asked. The room went silent, all eyes on me. Brian looked confused, Richard stiffened, and I kept my voice steady, calm, almost cheerful. "I just wanted to thank everyone for being here," I said. "It really means a lot to have our friends and family supporting us, especially considering the unusual circumstances." There was this tiny ripple of nervous laughter. People weren't sure if I was joking. And then I added, "I also wanted to give a special thanks to Richard for being so involved, not just with the wedding but with all the creative accounting happening behind the scenes." The ripple of laughter died immediately. Richard's face turned this deep, blotchy red. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "No, really, the invoices from your friend's catering company, the payments from the business accounts, the fake floral company that never actually delivered anything?" I shrugged. "I mean, who knew a wedding could double as a money laundering scheme?" Brian whispered. "What are you doing?" I ignored him. "Anyway," I said, "I just thought everyone should know how hard Richard worked to make this night possible. The effort is truly criminal." I left it hanging like that, letting the words soak in. But here's where the real twist dropped. I wasn't the only one who had started digging. Turns out my mom, of all people, had been feeling weird about the sudden rush of contracts and paperwork getting pushed my way without telling me. She had passed some of them to a friend of hers who works in banking, and guess what? They spotted irregularities, big ones. She texted me during the rehearsal dinner, just before Richard's speech, in fact, to say she'd filed a formal report with the authorities. So while Richard was giving his family legacy toast federal, investigators were getting tipped off about him, about the wedding, about everything. And the cherry on top? Brian knew the whole time. When I confronted him later that night, away from the crowd, he finally admitted it. Richard was in deep trouble. The businesses were barely holding together. This wedding wasn't just about getting me into the family. It was about bringing in new assets, new names on accounts, fresh credit lines tied to me so they could cover their debts and keep the whole empire from collapsing. "You were never supposed to find out," Brian said. "It's just complicated." Complicated? That's what he called it, like using me as a financial shield in his father's collapsing house of cards was some minor inconvenience. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. I just nodded, took my purse, and walked out of the rehearsal dinner. I didn't go back, not to the hotel, not to Brian, not to the house, because by morning the whole thing was going to come crashing down. And the best part? I wasn't lifting a finger. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up in my sister's guest room in Queens. She's the one who picked me up that night after I walked out. I barely said 2 words on the ride to her place, just sat there replaying everything. Brian, Richard, the prenup, the lies, the fact that I almost married into a family that saw me as a tool, a shield, a name to slap on paperwork and send to the bank. By sunrise, my phone was full of messages. "Brian, please come back. We need to talk." "Richard, your behavior is unacceptable." Brian's mom, "This is all a misunderstanding. Let's clear it up before the ceremony." The ceremony? Like that was still happening? But I wasn't done yet. See, my uncle didn't just stop at finding the shady accounting after the rehearsal dinner blow-up. He filed some reports of his own. He looped in a friend from the state attorney's office. Things were already moving, but I had one last thing I needed to do myself. Face them, all of them. So I got dressed. Simple outfit, clean hair, no makeup. I wasn't showing up to impress anyone. I was showing up for the truth. The venue was already being set up when I arrived. White chairs, soft music, florists unloading trucks. A wedding that wasn't going to happen. And there they were. Brian pacing by the bar, Richard on the phone barking orders, Brian's mom and sister whispering in a corner, glancing at me like I was a bomb with a timer counting down. I walked straight toward them. Brian saw me first. Relief washed over his face, like maybe I'd come to patch things up. Maybe I was having second thoughts. Maybe I was ready to be the good little wife who signed the papers and smiled for the photos. "No. We need to talk," I said. Brian started into some rehearsed speech. "Listen, it got out of hand. My dad, he's just protective. You know how he is." I cut him off. "No, Brian, we're not talking about your dad. We're talking about you. That froze him like he'd forgotten he was part of this. The blame was supposed to land on Richard. I held up my phone, scrolling to the screenshot I'd saved, the notes on the first draft, his handwriting. Explain this, I said, shoving it in his face. 6 months ago, before any of this blew up, you were already rewriting the deal, already making sure I got nothing if it all fell apart. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. It's complicated. There it is again, I said. Complicated. Then Richard stormed over, phone still pressed to his ear. What are you doing here? I thought we were past this childish tantrum. I turned to him, calm and steady. You should go check your email. He blinked. What? Go check right now. Because my uncle had sent over the full report that morning. Every shady invoice, every questionable payment. The report was now copied to Richard's business partners, his board of directors, and oh yeah, the state authorities. Richard looked at his phone. The color drained from his face. Brian looked between us. What's happening? I laughed. I couldn't help it. Your dad just lost the game. Richard exploded. You little. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yeah, I said. I protected myself, something your son was supposed to do. And right there in front of everyone, Richard broke, loud, red-faced, spitting words I won't even repeat about me, about my family, about how people like me are leeches and gold diggers and nobodies who don't understand legacy. The whole staff heard. A few guests who'd arrived early heard. My sister, standing by the door, heard. She was already pulling out her phone, recording. Brian didn't defend me, not once. He just stood there, staring at the floor like a kid who'd been caught stealing from his dad's wallet. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to salvage. No love, no respect, nothing. I left them standing there, walked straight past the decorators, the caterers, the DJ setting up his booth. I texted my uncle on the way out. It's done. Move forward with everything. By that afternoon, the wedding was officially canceled. Vendors were calling nonstop. Guests were asking what happened. Richard's name was already getting passed around in certain business circles as someone to stay away from. And Brian? He tried. Oh, did he try? Texting, calling, leaving voicemails, begging to meet, saying he had no idea about the deeper business stuff, that he thought the prenup was just routine, that his dad had pressured him that we could start fresh. Start fresh after using me as bait for a financial cover-up, after letting his father tear me down in public, after standing by while I carried the weight of their mess? No thanks. It was weird. I thought I'd feel shattered. I thought I'd spend weeks crying into my sister's couch cushions, drowning in takeout and reality TV. But I wasn't sad, not really. I was angry. Furious, actually. But under that, there was relief, a deep, clean kind of relief that hits when you realize you barely escaped something awful, that you were about 5 seconds from being locked in a life where you didn't matter. My parents were quiet about it, supportive but quietly disappointed, like they'd sensed something was wrong but didn't want to say it. My sister, she called Richard a discount mob boss and poured us both a drink. Brian's mom sent me a long email 2 days later, trying to smooth things over. She said I overreacted, that family dynamics are complicated, and that I shouldn't have made things public. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some nights I still replay the whole thing. I wonder how far Richard would have gone if I hadn't pushed back, if I'd signed that paper, if I'd let Brian talk me into staying quiet. Would I have ended up as just another name on his spreadsheet, a placeholder, a shield, another casualty of a man desperate to keep his crumbling empire standing? Instead, I walked away. I still have the wedding dress. I thought about selling it, but maybe I'll keep it as a reminder of how close I came to trading my freedom for a fairy tale that was really just a cage. And Richard, I hear he's busy with lawyers now, and Brian, I guess he'll have to find someone else to keep the peace.